Yep, Ian, can you see that? Okay, that's all good. Yep, okay.
Everything's good.
All right, sounds good. I guess good evening to most of you guys, right? I think most people are in Europe. It's nice to be presenting to this audience again. So what I have here for you, maybe I need to explain my title a little bit here. I was going to be a bit provocative. The nebulous world of hair damage. So I've worked as a measurement scientist in this industry for over 30 years now. And if I start to think about, well, what are some of the questions and what are the things that people have asked me to do most over the years, pretty high on that list is probably something along the lines of, can you please take this hair into your lab and tell me how damaged it is? Can you please tell me how healthy versus how damaged this hair is? And I think whoever's asking that question generally thinks it's a fairly straightforward, trivial thing to do. You know, don't you just put it on your hair damage-o-meter and press go and it spits out a number? But it's more complicated than that. It's considerably more complicated than that. So let me try and give you a bit of an analogy to try and set the scene here. If I was to say to you, see that house over there? How tidy is that house? How neat and well kept is that house? So you might look at the outside and say, that's a pretty nice looking house. Only to get through the front door and find that it really is quite a mess on the inside. You might have the complete reverse scenario where it looks a mess on the outside, but you walk through the front door and it looks really nice. Or maybe it looks nice on the outside, you walk through the front door and it looks nice, but you go upstairs and the upstairs is a hot and holy mess. So maybe you can see where I'm going with this. Hair has an amazingly complicated structure. It's made of all these different phases, all of these different structures. And these different phases and structures are going to break down at different rates and to different extents as a function of the various things that we do to them. So, for example, we all know, I guess, right, that the outside of the hair we call the cuticle. To keep the house analogy going, it's kind of like the tiles on the roof of the house. Overlapping tiles, overlapping plates, which represent a relatively small amount of the total fiber, but which are very hard, very tough, and which protect the more vulnerable inside. But as the elements pound on the roof of your house, so those tiles will gradually start to chip and crack and uplift and abrade and maybe even become dislodged. And really the same thing happens to your cuticle. If we think about, what is probably the main cause of that happening, it would probably tend to make sense that it was mechanical means, right? Mechanical forms of damage. So we perhaps think about brushes and combs rubbing against the hair surface, and perhaps more specifically, other hair fibers rubbing against other hair fibers. Hair is incredibly tough stuff, probably tougher than the stuff that makes up the teeth in the brush and the comb. But if you have two hair fibers rubbing against two hair fibers, now you've really got the potential for some pretty good, really surface interactions and erosions taking place. So, but as the elements pound on the roof of your house, well, you on the inside, of course, are protected, right? So long as that protective barrier holds up. If it doesn't hold up, then all bets are off. But if that protective barrier is holding up, then in the inside, you are nice and safe. And so in the same sense, when all this friction and abrasion and erosion is taking place at the surface, presumably the inside of the hair is nicely protected. On the other hand, if you hit the hair with a chemical treatment, something like a bleaching treatment, that bleaching treatment passes through the cuticle relatively easy and starts to go to work on the inside of the hair. So its primary job, let's say for a bleach, is to break down the melanin pigment granules within the hair, but it's also going to start interacting with the protein as well and degrading the protein. So you're going to start to break down the internal structure of the hair. But if you were to look at the surface of the hair, it would look exactly the same as it was before you hit it with a chemical treatment. We've all seen those pictures of uplifted hair surfaces and tend to think, well, that's what happens when I put a chemical treatment on the hair. But I've had people literally call me up and say, what's going on? I bleached hair and the surface looks fine. Yeah, in my experience, that's what happens. I don't doubt that the chemical treatment passing through the cuticle has probably weakened it to a certain extent, so that it probably will break down faster with more grooming, but at least that treatment itself doesn't actually do anything to the hair surface. So I think you can see then how really damage well, the hair can break down in many, many, many different ways. The hair can break down in 101 different ways, and it's a result of 101 different insults. And so when you think about it, the term damage could mean, well, literally anything, right? So there's so many different ways. Damage can be just about anything. because it's just about anything, well, at the same time, it also means just about nothing. And one of the reasons we generally want to be able to talk about damage is that people want to talk about hair repair. People want to talk about hair protection. But of course, well, if the whole concept of damage means nothing, then basically hair repair and hair protection doesn't mean anything either. So this is really a rather, unsatisfactory situation, and one which people will tend to exploit to their own means by making some rather outlandish claims and so forth to try and sell you products. So I've been advocating for a long time now that basically whenever we talk about hair damage, we should talk about it in much more specific language. And I'll get back to that towards the end of my presentation. But really what I want to talk about today is the ways that hair can break down. What are some of the stimuli for that breakdown, how we can track the whole process, and maybe even how we can intercede in that process to slow it down in certain ways as well. So we started off talking about the surface of the hair. So let's carry on there for now. So here, I think everybody's seen these sorts of images. They're very high magnification pictures of the hair surface, which are taken by a technique known as scanning electron microscopy, or SEM. So, here you can see the surface of some pretty healthy looking hair. There's a little bit of wear and tear there, but in the grand scheme of things, this is fairly decent looking hair. If you look closely, you can see a little bit of wear at some of the cuticle edges. You can probably find a few micro cracks, but as I said, in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty decent looking hair cuticle, at least in comparison to things like that. So, here are some of the ways that the cuticle structure can break down as a function of all the things we do to it.